Think this is going to work? I don't know. He thinks it's going to work. So, given that we were doing a baby dedication today, all I've been thinking about all week long is being a dad. Just weird that, hey? It's funny because for those of you that don't know, I've got 4 kids ranging from 35 to almost 15. Rachel's going to be 15 on what day? Thursday? Thursday? Yeah, she's going to be 15 on Thursday. So, exciting times. And the truth is, I love being a dad and all of that means. Because it means a lot sometimes. And I know I'm going to look at everybody, but just know I'm always looking at you, right? I'm just saying. Because new dad, like you're probably, your whole world right now is just, okay, what's coming, right? Like you don't know. So let me tell you, it's good. In fact, it's great. And you're going to start losing your hair soon, and it'll start turning gray as well. But this is the truth. I love being a father. It's like one of the greatest things in my life. It is certainly one of the greatest blessings that the Lord has given me in this life. I enjoy my kids. I like being their dad. They're a lot of fun, right? Well, you know that, right? Like, no, Jamie, please don't say anything. But they are. They're a lot of fun. They're goofy. They're kind of a lot like me, but nothing like me, and a whole lot like their mom, and not really like her at all. It's so cool. And you guys are on this incredible journey now that many of us in this room have been on for a while, and every bit of it is good. And no matter what season you happen to be in, I find you're always looking back and going, oh, I miss that. When you're there, it's like, oh my goodness, just go to sleep, right? But it's good. Even the days when my kids are climbing the walls and being how teenagers can sometimes be, I still love them and I still love being a dad. Not that I'm all that great at it. I do my best, but I'm the first one to admit that I'm not perfect. None of us is flawless. We all make mistakes. The truth is that as children, we learn how to parent from watching our parents, our imperfect parents, because they too were the same. They're imperfect. We saw and learned, including from mistakes. We learned from experiences that we had, and not every experience with our parents was perfect either. So this is honestly one of the great reasons why we should celebrate the fact that we have the perfect model for fatherhood and, in fact, parenthood in our Father in heaven. Because what he shows us, what he teaches us, and there's so much, but what he does is so good. Even the little bits of it have helped encourage me and draw me in to be a better father to my children. One of the teachings that I've always found that was really powerful and doesn't necessarily actually speak directly to fathers, but when you know that it is for all of us, I looked at that and I thought, man, if I do these things, it'll just make me better at being who I'm called to be, a husband, a father, a friend, right? And so, although I kind of talked to the two of you today, I really talked to all of us. And it comes from something that the Apostle Paul said in 1 Corinthians 13, verses 13 and 14, where he says this. Yeah, it's not going to change. You go ahead. I'll point at you, Daryl. So go to the next slide. There you go. Be on your guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous. Be strong. Do everything in love. And although it seems kind of simple and straightforward when you read it like that, I want to unpack this a little bit to give you a glimpse at what he's talking about so that we can understand how to be better fathers and better mothers and better friends and family, yeah? So the first thing that he talks about here is be on guard. Now the Greek word that's translated on guard here, it can also be translated something like be watchful, the kind of way you'd be watchful if there were like lurking beasts just outside your camp, right? Wolves or something, maybe tigers. No, that's scary. I don't want to go there. It's a very strong word to use in the Greek, in the original word. It's a very strong word to use, but it's appropriate because what the word actually means when we're talking about being on guard is we're actually talking about something that is protective. So it's not just watching for your well-being. It's watching to guard for your family, for your loved ones, in fact. We are to be protective of our loved ones, our people. I remember when Rachel was still really little, I mean, like little like this, she and I were out at a store. It might have been a Walmart or something like that. It was a department store of some kind. And I just had her by hand, as you do, and you walk much slower when they're that size. And we're walking along, and a thing broke out, like a fight or some kind of chaos just erupted. Some guy, big guy, is yelling, and he's screaming. He's making a... You ever been to Walmart? Yeah, it happens. So he's losing his mind, and I'm kind of frozen, waiting and watching to see what he's going to do, what direction they're going to move. And what I didn't realize until I was, okay, I need to move. Then I noticed one of my hands was behind my back. I hadn't thought about it, but as soon as this happened out here, the hand that Rachel was holding on to did this. And I put myself, instinctively, between my daughter and harm's way. You ever done something like that? Like without thinking about it, you just do a thing and then you're like, oh, hey, that's pretty cool. Like, see, I didn't think about it at the time, but the truth is, I don't just do this with my kids. I kind of do this all the time. You and me walking down the sidewalk, something happens. I tend to put a hand out and step in front. It's always been my way. It's been my nature. But I think it illustrates that deep inside of us, at the core of our being, God has instilled this thing in us that we want to protect the ones that we love, right? Men, we as fathers, we ourselves will willingly put ourselves in harm's way to protect our family. Mothers even have a word for it, right? They call it mama bear. Ever heard that? Right? Every time I hear mama bear, the words being spoken, I'm like, duck, right? Because it means that somebody, don't mess with a mama when it comes to her babies, right? Because we become ferocious in protecting the ones we love. But whether it's men or women or just family in general or just your church family, we all have that within us to guard, to protect the ones that we love. But here's the thing. Danger comes in many forms. And the truth is, when Paul is talking about this, when he's telling us to be watchful like there are lurking beasts around, it's important that we recognize that not all of the lurking beasts in our world are going to be things that we can see with our eyes. Sometimes there are things out there that are trying to do us harm that we don't necessarily know are there until we're looking for them. So one of the things that we should be doing is asking the questions that don't get asked anywhere else. You know, are my children following Jesus or learning about him? Are they learning about faith and growing in their spiritual lives? Are they drawn in by things, by ideas that are destructive or harmful? Are they being filled with love and peace instead? As fathers, as mothers, as people of faith in general, we should be on guard. But we should also stand firm in the faith, something that Paul says. And this is about our foundation, standing firm in the faith. This is not just about what we think. It's not about agreeing on ideas. This is about how we live and what we do, standing firm in the faith. As fathers or mothers or simply people who follow Jesus, it is critical that we do this. You don't know what kind of turns life will take. Talk to anybody that's been around the track a few times, and they're going to tell you sometimes life just happens, and it comes from out of nowhere. You don't know what to expect. We don't know what we're going to be confronted with. We don't know experiences we're going to have. We can be more careful than anybody else that we know, and the rains still come. So if the rains are going to come, we want to make sure that our house is built on rock and has a good foundation instead of the sand where we might sink. Understand that standing firm in the faith isn't just about knowing God or understanding that God hasn't forgotten about you when you seem isolated and alone and life seems to be going sideways. It also has a whole lot to do with what we model for the people around us in this life. It's about stepping out to do the right thing when everything that you're feeling inside doesn't want to. You hear that? Remember, we are to take hold of the life that is truly life. And faith isn't just something we think. It has to be lived, right? So one winter, many years ago now, kids were just like, Crystal and Jamie were like this. I'm not even sure if Rachel was born, although I think you might have been an infant, right? Yeah, you were about Scotty's size when this happened. But it was one of those days, it was just before Christmas, a couple weeks maybe, and we had one of those like light drizzly days where suddenly everything turns to ice. That's always a lot of fun. And of course, I'm pulling out a thing, a woman goes whipping by, I hit my brakes, we're both doing this. It was like the ice capades in cars, on a road, on a slight hill, so neither one of us is stopping, right? We had no control. We're at the mercy of the black ice that neither one of us had seen, but I slid out into the road from the side of the road, and my back bumper hit her side of her car and tore off a piece of the black trim off her car, put a big hole in her car. And we eventually, when the cars stopped, we got them over to the side. We exchanged information. And about a week later, she presented me with an estimate from a body shop that said the work would be about $700. Now, I was pastoring full-time in a job where they didn't actually pay me to do it. And I was working a bunch of jobs to try and keep food on the table. We had nothing, is what I'm getting at. We had no money, except the money we'd been saving all year long for Christmas. It was $700. I'm not, you can't make this stuff up. It was exactly $700 that we had. But it was my fault, and I knew it was the right thing to do. And so I gave her the money to fix her car. It was Christmas after all. And said, if we were going to have a Christmas the way we had hoped, that's going to be up to God, and He's going to have to make the way. And we moved on. Well, we were into January, about a week or two into January, when one day I'm out and about downtown and I see this same woman drive by. And I knew it was her because she was driving the same car with the same hole. Now, I had all her information from when we exchanged information, so I went to her house and I knocked on the door. I was furious. We didn't have anything, and that money, that $700, that was our Christmas tree. We didn't have a Christmas tree. We were going to buy a Christmas tree, get the kids presents, and maybe, if we had money left over, have turkey, and I love turkey. I gave her the money because it was the right thing to do, but in that moment, I was having an awful lot of trouble with it. What she had done was dishonest. It was wrong. She had stolen from me. And she answered the door, and I told her as much. And we stood there, just inside her front doorway, and she began giving me excuses, lots of excuses about why she spent the money and didn't fix her car. And what made it all the harder for me, and maybe you've been in a situation like this, is it was so painfully obvious that she was just making stuff up in the moment, stumbling over her words and like grasping for ideas, right? Like it was just... And I'm sitting there trying not to scream and yell. I was so mad. And as she's talking to me, I remembered a story that Jesus told. Like it just came flooding into my mind. It was in Matthew 18 where he tells this story about a king who's settling accounts. And there's a man who owes him like, I don't know, thousands, maybe millions of dollars. Oh, so much money, there's no way he's ever going to be able to pay it back. And he comes in, and the king orders that this man, his wife, and even his children are to be sold to pay off the debt. And the guy falls on his face in front of the king and begs the king, please, 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 no. Please, I'll find a way. I'll pay you back. But please don't do this to us. Release me, release me. And the king has mercy on the guy and says, you know what? Forget it. You don't owe me anything. You're good. You're free. You're clear. You can go. Enjoy your life. And then the man, he leaves the king's court and he goes outside. And as he's walking home, he sees a guy who owes him like $20, $50, something like that. And he sees this guy and he grabs him by the throat and starts choking him, demanding the money from him. And when the guy says, I don't have the money, but I'll do whatever it takes. I'll pay you back. I promise. I swear. Just give me a chance. And when he can't, the first man has the second man thrown into prison until he can pay off the debt. Well, let me tell you, when people see him knowing what just happened, when they see this guy doing it, they go and they tell the king. Put the next slide up. Then the master called the servant in and said, you wicked servant. I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?" In anger, his master turned him over to the jailers to be tortured until he could pay back all that he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brothers and sisters from your heart. So this is the story that pops into my head while I'm standing in this woman's, vestibule, I don't know what to call it, the little front by the door. And she's just making up things and trying to get me to go away. And all of a sudden, like some awful, horrible tidal wave crashing over me, I remember the kind of person I was before Jesus gave me life. I remember all of the horrible, horrible things I had done in my life. They all came crashing down into my mind. All the things that God had forgiven me for, not because I had earned that forgiveness, but because his son Jesus willingly took the punishment I deserved when he died on the cross so that I could be forgiven. And just like that, all the excuses I was being given in that moment were irrelevant. They didn't matter anymore. I felt this warmth come over me. My faith tells me that I must forgive people, not just the people I'm okay with forgiving. That's easy, right? If I'm okay with it, then it's nothing. It doesn't take faith. It doesn't take heart. I just do it. Yep, no problem. My faith tells me that I have to forgive the people that I believe owe me something, the people that I even call enemies. And in that moment, despite how angry I had been just a few minutes before, I felt that warmth, and I instantly felt peace in my heart and my mind and my spirit. And I told her, "I forgive you. Don't worry about it." I asked her if I could pray for her, and when she said yes, I did. And then I wished her well and never saw her again. As soon as I got home, Tracy could tell that something was up. I mean, she knew why I stormed out of the house in the first place, so she asked me what was going on. And I told her everything, the story I just told you. And what was interesting about that is it was hard until it clicked. But while I'm telling Tracy, my son Jamie, who's like very tall now, who was only about this big at the time, just out of diapers, he's up on the stairwell watching us. And he heard every word of that story, every breath of it. He heard my heart in wanting to do what Jesus asks us to do, to love people unconditionally, to not judge them, to lift them up and forgive them. He doesn't always hear me when I speak, and truthfully, not everything that I say is worth listening to, but that day he heard me. That day he saw what it looks like to stand firm in our faith, and that is a legacy that I leave to him and to the others that I love. Standing firm in our faith leaves a legacy of faith. So, be on guard, stand firm in the faith, and be courageous. Let's go to the next one. Next one. Courageous. Okay. All right. He'll catch up. Raising children has more than its fair share of trials. Yeah? Huh? Do you need to be courageous to be a parent? You do. Take my word for it. Or just look around the room at all the people going, yeah, it's wow. Right? So as fathers, we need to have courage. As mothers, you need to have courage. You know, as just men and women of faith, we need to have courage in this fallen and broken world. It's who we're meant to be. Because we're going to face all kinds of things we didn't even know existed, and we're going to experience all kinds of stuff we never expected, and every bit of it is going to call us to have courage, because even if this world doesn't scare you, I'm sure your kids are going to give you a heart attack or two before they're fully grown. I'm just saying. So many, many years ago, again, actually not long after that Christmas incident, I took a bunch of guys, we're still in Arm Prior, I took a bunch of guys up to where my parents' cottage was to roof my dad's cottage for him. brought a bunch of guys up, and I was like halfway through the day, I was on one of the lower roofs, kind of this awning that came off the front, and it was a little peak thing, but then the higher roof came down, so I'm like wedged down in this little gap, head first, trying to pull out old shingles and leaves and rot and gross. It was just a disgusting job, so I did it instead of asking somebody else to do it. And I'm down in there, and I'm working away, and all of a sudden I hear this tiny little voice, "Hi, Daddy." And I look down at the ground, and there's nothing. And I look way back around to the other lawn over there on the side. There's nothing. And I try to lean out so I can see around the corner down, and I don't see anything. And then this like deep dread fills my heart as I slowly lift my eyes up above me, and way up there where the top peak of the thing is, I see this tiny little face looking over, and it's Jamie, who's found the ladder, climbed up on the roof, and he's come to help his dad. And all I did was, "Don't move!" Wiggled myself out backwards, climbed up onto the higher roof, ran up to the top, picked him up in both arms, and made my way over to the ladder where I could pass him to his mother to bring him back to the ground. For the rest of the day, I'm just saying. It was crazy. Truth is, it takes courage to be a parent. It takes courage just living life with the people that you love. Life takes courage. If you are a follower of Jesus, it takes courage. It's going to take courage to release your child's bike when they're first learning how to. I mean, it seems like a silly thing, but every parent I know, I was in the same place. The second you let go of that seat, you regret it, right? It's scary for real. It's going to take courage to let them step out on their own for the first time, whether it's the first time they go for a sleepover or you're sending them away for college. It's hard. It's going to take courage because there are going to be times when you will have to let them go, when everything inside you wants to hold on tight forever. This is true for all of us. We have to have courage because the church is people, right? It's not this. The church is people, and let's face it, people are messy sometimes. Even the best of us get it wrong sometimes, and growing together, being in unity, sharing life, it takes courage because all of us will continue to make mistakes from time to time. All of us will have moments when we get it wrong, and maybe feelings will get hurt, but we cannot give in to fear. Remember, courage does not mean that you're no longer afraid of something. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Courage means that we step forward in faith despite the fear that we're feeling. So be on guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, and also be strong. Speaking of parenting, you three knock it off. Every once in a while, just got to stop, right? So let's face it, being strong has a number of different meanings. The strength of will, strength of character, strength in muscle, strength of voice or in word, and so on and so forth. And yet the Apostle Paul just says, be strong. No, before this. Anyway, no, leave it there. You're fine. It just says be strong. So one of the things that I always like to do when I'm confronted with an idea is I start looking at what does the actual word mean back, because this scriptures were written in Greek and Aramaic, right? So we go back to what the original, so we can see why was it translated this way. And when I look at the original word, it says some interesting things. It says to grow strong ourselves, but it also means to give support to others. It also means to lift others up, to strengthen others, to be firm for others, to be determined and be unwavering. So I started looking at, Paul talks about being strong a number of times, so I looked up the next scripture in Romans 15:1, where Paul in another letter says this about strong. He says, "We who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak and not please ourselves." So again, Paul's really big into this idea that it's not about us. It's about the people in our lives, the ones that we love, and maybe even the ones that we're not quite there with yet. Next slide. So when he says strong, that we're to be strong. He's talking about living a life that encourages and enhances others' faith. It's about living a life in such a way so as to never put a stumbling block in front of someone who's trying to grow. Having strength is about learning to live without judgment of others and to always, no matter what the circumstance, be outwardly loving, something I have not always been good with. There's a story, I know I've told it here before, or at least I'm sure I have, but it's a lesson I'll never forget. It was the summer of 2005, just after Crystal was born. I had a kidney stone, and I went to the local doctor in Sussex, New Brunswick, and he treated me horribly. He was rude. He was treating me like a junkie looking for a fix. Like I was just looking to get some prescription painkillers. He was so rude. He yelled at me at one point because I asked him why he told me there was nothing wrong with me, and then he was prescribing me antibiotics, and I asked him why he was prescribing me antibiotics if there was actually nothing wrong with me, and he started screaming his head off at me. It was brutal. It was brutal. And at the end of it, he wouldn't help me at all. He just sent me home to be in pain, and I wasn't, if you ever had a kidney stone, they're not comfortable. So after about a week at home, I got to a place where I was in absolutely crippling pain. So I had Tracy drive me more than an hour to St. John, down on the coast, to the big regional hospital there, where they told me that not only did I have the biggest kidney stone they'd ever seen, but also it had completely blocked my kidney at that point, and they would have to do surgery. Then they went on to explain to me that the doctor in Sussex didn't even have the right ultrasound on my file. He was looking at the woman's in the next room who had had a hysterectomy. So his actual words were, I got good news and bad news. The bad news is you have the biggest kidney stone I've ever seen. We made arrangements for the surgery and all that stuff. He's walking out the room and I said, hey, what about the good news? And he laughed and he said, oh, your uterus has been removed. Anyway, I stuck around at the hospital, now even more infuriated with the doctor in Sussex because I'd been suffering, and I mean really suffering, a lot of pain, crippling pain for a week. And I was not in the mood, and I was quite angry. And then I was out, and I had the surgery, and I woke up, and the nurse said, just wait. And she went and got the doctor, and the doctor came, and he said, you have cancer. I have cancer. Not now. Then. Praise Jesus. Then he went on to explain to me just what was absolutely baffling him, because when I went to Sussex, it hadn't blocked my line to the kidney yet. There was still a possibility of doing like an ultrasonic, some of you are nodding, I don't know what it is. It's like apparently they set up a really big stereo and they blast it with sound, right? Yeah. You know I'm funny, right? Okay, all right. So anyway, had he diagnosed me properly, there's a chance they could have done that and successfully just passed the stones. But if that had happened, we would not have known I had cancer until they were giving me 2 weeks to live. So the doctor in Sussex, the one that, an hour, 2 hours earlier I hated so much, was actually responsible for saving my life. And God knew it the whole time. Here I was judging my circumstance. I don't like being yelled at. I don't like being treated like that. And I went to judgment immediately and then decided this guy was just a jerk and acted accordingly and carried it with me. But if it wasn't for him, I would not be here. It's hard sometimes to be strong in this world, especially when we're talking about leaving out judgment, because we're so used to doing it, all of us, every single person I've ever met. This is how we do life. We observe something and we make a judgment about it. We don't mean to, and we try to reteach ourselves that we don't judge for certain things, but it's how we grow up in this world. We have to leave judgment to God. He's really the only one that really knows what's going on anyway. And the strength that we are to show as it reflects the image of God is going to be one of the greatest character traits anyone can pick up from you, especially your children. To love sacrificially, unconditionally, and universally so that they learn to love others the same way. That's the biggest gift you can give to your loved ones in this world and to the world around you. So be strong and think twice about how you react when you're cut off in traffic. Be strong and show kindness to that person you cannot stand. Be strong and govern your tongue wisely. Be strong and refuse to judge other people. So be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong, and finally, do everything in love. Almost 2 months ago now, I preached a message on loving your neighbor. I don't know how many of you might remember that, but I preached that message. And the same thing happened after that message as what happens every time I preach on that subject. I get a number of people, almost a lineup of folks that come up to me afterwards and go, how am I supposed to love other people, my neighbor, when so-and-so is like this, right? I've got this guy at my office, and I just want to smack him, right? We have this fun little conversation. But that's a valid question. How do we love, because Jesus says love even your enemies, how do we love the people in our lives that we just can't stand? I can't tell you the number of times God has said to me, I want you to love that person. I'm like, but I want to smack him. I just want to slap him just one time. I'll tell you what, you let me slap him, then I'll see what I can do? No, this is not a bargain. We are called to love people, all people, every person, because that's how the Father feels. Jesus didn't die for Christians. He died for everybody. Every human being on this planet bears the image of God, and He desires to show them what that means, to show them His salvation. Who are we to judge them? We are called to love them. But here's the problem. The real problem isn't about being called to love people that are difficult. The problem is in what we believe love is. Our definition of love. Because when you and I have a conversation about what do you think love is, we start talking about all the mushy feelings that we have for the one that's so special to us, right? Or you pick up a baby and go, oh, and you melt, right? That's what we talk about. But God talks about love in His Word, in the Bible, the revelation that He gave us so we could understand this stuff. And in His Word, He says this. Can you put that up on the board? He says, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it doesn't boast, it's not proud, doesn't dishonor others, it's not self-seeking, it's not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs, it does not delight in evil, but it rejoices with the truth, it always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. What feelings does he mention? None. Not one. Now, this isn't to say that there isn't an aspect of love that involves those feelings, because absolutely there is. Of course there is. But when God outlines this, He gave us this for a reason. Yes? And I believe it's so that we can understand how do we love people that you just... So let me ask you this. If it's not about how you feel, then can you be patient with someone who's being a jerk? Can you be kind to someone even though they don't deserve it? And let me remind you, if you've ever worked in retail, you've already had to do this. Can you keep your anger to yourself even when somebody's pushing your buttons? Can you keep yourself from being envious of someone who has something that you would really like to have? Sure we can. I could keep going and going, but I think you get my point. Love has to come first. Can you imagine what the world would look like if everybody just did this? Just this. Just this. Can you imagine what this world would be like? That no matter what we believed, no matter who we were, no matter where we went, people did this. Can you imagine what that would look like? Can we be intentional about doing this in our lives? Because I think we can. Right? His Word also tells us that all things are possible with Him. All things. So even though I don't always feel like I can do this, with Him I can. He'll give you the strength. He'll give you the courage. He'll give you the power within you to step into these places when it's so difficult. When you got some woman that's just ripped you off and you really, 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 really just want to invite your cousin over to give her a smack, you can still do this instead. Love has to be first. In everything, absolutely everything. Love wins. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. No set of rules, no set of guidelines, no amount of convincing ever actually changed anybody. Love is the only force that has the power to transform someone, to change them. Think about who you were before ... Because that's a blank that can get filled in multiple times by multiple people, depending on where you came from and what your life has been like. I've tried so many. You know how many January 1sts there have been? There have been a lot, right? The kids mentioned old. There have been a lot of January 1sts in my life. I've made a lot of resolutions and couldn't hold to any of them. But love completely changed the person that I am. Forever. Radical transformation. I still to this day get people that I've known most of my life saying, "What happened to you, man?" In amazement. The same is true of you. Love transforms. Live life of love. That's the legacy worth living. I'm going to invite the worship team to come up because I have talked.